Netanyahu has been under growing political pressure to bring the evacuated residents back to their homes.
Next on the diplomatic track, the reports about a ceasefire being already agreed are not accurate. The Prime Minister's reiterated that, yes, of course, Israel is open to diplomacy, as we have been. It's always our go-to option. We've been within this situation for a year now, but Israel has yet to respond to this particular American-French proposal. In terms of Israel's military action to defend this country, the Prime Minister and the Chief of Staff could not have been clearer. The Prime Minister's directed the IDF to continue fighting with full force. According to the plan presented by the IDF, the fighting in Gaza also will continue until the objectives of this war have been achieved.
We once
again remind Chinese citizens not to travel to Lebanon in the near future, and Chinese citizens in Lebanon to pay close attention to the local situations and take commercial flights as soon as possible to return home or leave the country. In view of the current situation on the Lebanese-Israeli border, the Department of Consular Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Embassy in Lebanon have initiated the emergency responses to draft in relevant contingency plans and have issued multiple safety reminders.
The current number officially registered in shelters is 70,100 displaced people present in 533 shelters. These 533 shelters are managed by the governors who care for them. There are shelters in Bekaa dedicated to Syrians. There are more than 5 or 6 shelters and Syrians are living in them. This is apart from the presence of Syrians across the country. And here I want to highlight that we have observed departures through the Lebanese General Security Centers over the past 3 days. Approximately 27,000 citizens have left, half of whom are Lebanese and half are Syrians. So in 3 days, 13,500 Syrians have left Lebanon and returned to Syria. Here we can say that Syrians are able to return to Syria, as we have seen over 3 days, 13,500 Syrians left Lebanon willingly through the official border crossings. We have always been, and the official position of Lebanon is, with the implementation of international decisions and the resolution 1701, as we always believed that legitimacy is what protects Lebanon.
All right, so what happens next, even as the world is frantically calling for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon? Israel will have none of it. They have decided to not even respond to this proposal for a ceasefire. Instead, the Israeli Prime Minister has told his military to go ahead and continue the fighting with full force. This as the army chief, in fact, states publicly that the IDF is preparing for a possible ground offensive. So what happens next? What can be expected? Let's introduce our panel. Joining me on the show tonight is Major General Ashwini Sivach, Defense and Security Expert, Irina Sukuman, National Security and Geopolitical Analyst, joining us live from New York, Dr. Zakir Hussain, Middle East Expert, and in a moment we also have, in fact, at this point, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former Indian diplomat. Major General Ashwini Sivach, let me start with you. Does it now seem almost inevitable that we are going to see an Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon? Is it only a matter of when and not if, going by all the noises that are being made and all the statements that are coming from Tel Aviv, including from the Prime Minister himself, who seems to have completely disregarded all the calls for a 3-week ceasefire?
Absolutely. Neha, there is no doubt. There is no question that the ground offensive, as far as Israel is concerned, it will go. And when it will go, that's the only timing which is there, whether it is tomorrow, day after tomorrow. But no doubt the ground offensive has to go in Lebanon. And why it will go, there are reasons for it. As far as Israel is concerned, in a very systematic manner, they are proceeding toward the invasion. They have initially completely destroyed the communication system of Hezbollah. They have killed their military commander like Fawad Shakur and also Ibrahim Akil. And thereafter, they have softened up by doing a preparatory bombardment with their air force, artillery, as well as missile and rockets and drones. Now the next step will be a ground invasion. Why Israel is to do this? Because two reasons are there. One is they know it that Hezbollah is a more powerful than Hamas. It is 3 to 4 times more powerful. It has about 150, 1.5 lakhs soldiers. It has got almost 2 lakhs of rocket missile. It has got armored brigade. It is a better trained than Hamas. So if they leave Hezbollah now, Hezbollah is going to be a problem for them for time to come. That is point number one. Point number two is that as it is, Hezbollah has bombarding the northern Israel, and there are about 60,000 Israelis which have gone from this area and gone to central Israel. So there is a huge pressure in as far as Netanyahu is concerned that these people should be able to go back. They can only go back in case a buffer zone is made. A buffer zone can only be made in case Israel launch a ground operation and push the Hezbollah toward the central Lebanon and make a buffer zone of 60 to 70 kilometers so that these Israelis which have left their home can go back. Now, this two reasons is very important for them to keep this thing. As far as this 21 days ceasefire, which has been advocated by Americans as well as French, this is more of a formality. Israel is not going to follow it. Israel is going to do what it suits them. Israel also, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, its domestic politics also dictate that the war should continue. In fact, they want that Iran must come into this war. And if you hear the speech of in UNGA, Jeskian, who is the president of Iran, saying that the Israel is trying to put us on a trap, because the main aim of Israel is somehow, however, Iran should come and suck into this war, and due to which the US had no choice but to also come into this war, and then they will able to really defeat Iran in the sense their nuclear installation, which is a threat to Israel in time to come, that will be also gone. Whether Iran gets sucked in, that time will only tell. To me, it does not look like that the Iran will get sucked in. Iran will not come directly. Its economy not doing well. It has got a number of economic sanctions. What they will do, they will fight a war with their proxies of Hezbollah, Houthis and Hamas, as well as their militia in Iraq.
Been fighting these wars through its proxies for years and decades. In fact, there were also reports that Iran is reaching out to Russia for supply of missiles to the Houthis. But yes, very unlikely that Iran would want to directly get involved in this conflict. But one thing is clear, that the conflict is certainly widening. We know it's already gone well beyond Gaza. And you're right, Netanyahu has a vested interest in his pursuit of his political survival. He would want to see this conflict go on and on for as long as possible. But let me take this to Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, is it once again a situation where the international community has been left wringing its hands, those constant appeals for peace and a ceasefire, frantic efforts being made at the United Nations General Assembly as we speak by the United States, France, multiple other countries including Arab powers. They've proposed a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. And Netanyahu's response to that is, we're not even listening, we're not even paying attention. We are going to go full steam ahead. We want to finish our enemies. They talked about wiping out Hamas completely in Gaza. Now they want to considerably weaken Hezbollah. They talk about returning their own people to their homes along the northern border with Lebanon. The question really is, where is this going to end? I mean, you have the US and all these other countries that have been pushing for a ceasefire deal in Gaza for months now. That war has gone on for 11 months and we've seen how they've failed spectacularly. It doesn't look like they're going to have much success in the case of Lebanon either.
Absolutely, Neha. When we discussed this, I think a couple of days ago in your program, we had an Israeli guest who assured you at that time that a ground invasion was not being planned, if you recall. Now, since the truce has been rejected, we don't know whether Netanyahu is doing grandstanding about putting troops on the ground, because if he puts troops on the ground, he is also overstretching Israel's military capacity at a time when he has not been able to eliminate Hamas, for the simple reason that Hamas is more than a word. Hamas is a movement. Hamas is in people's mind. Hamas is everywhere. He has not been able to completely eliminate Hamas. Now, as far as southern Lebanon is concerned, it shows that the major powers are paralyzed. The Security Council is paralyzed. The United Nations can take no action. And it shows that Netanyahu is taking full advantage of the fact that the Americans are nearing the end of a polarized election campaign. The Jewish lobby is very powerful in both parties. Nobody wants to take steps to alienate certain kinds of voters that could swing the outcome in swing states. And under those circumstances, to a certain extent, Netanyahu has a free hand. But it's a dangerous game of brinkmanship he's playing, because I don't see Iran being foolish enough to come into direct conflict with Israel. They will not do that. They will continue to fight through their proxies, the Houthis and Hezbollah. They will continue to arm them. And Lebanon is a large independent country. When you cross the border and go into Lebanon in this manner, you are not only breaking international law, you are also jeopardizing possible peace agreements with Arab countries. That was very much in the making when India was hosting the G20, if you recall, Neha. And you are also making it impossible for moderate Arab states to remain neutral in this conflict. What would that mean then? It would mean that it would be a much bigger conflagration. It would mean perhaps shutting down of airspace, perhaps Turkey and Iran also shutting down their airspace. It would impact the global economy, and it would have repercussions on Israel and on its Western allies, because you cannot rule out, Neha, the fact that when they go into a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, which I hope and pray they don't, there would be jihadi terrorist attacks on Western civilian targets, which would be extremely dangerous and which would have a cascading impact on international tourism. Because people would ask themselves, is it safe to fly on an American airline? Is it safe to fly on a Western airline? Is it safe to travel at all? It would definitely impact tourism in these areas which are close to the conflict zone. It would affect the economy of Israel. It cannot continue to keep on fighting in this manner without its economy getting affected. And certainly, I don't think that the West, the European Union particularly, which has invested a lot in rebuilding Lebanon, would be content to sit back and allow southern Lebanon to be destroyed in the manner in which the Gaza Strip has been destroyed. It has implications for the credibility of the European Union, because the European Union foreign policy chief was very clear just 2 days ago when we discussed it on your channel, when he said this must stop. There should be no ground invasion of southern Lebanon. So,
try telling that to Netanyahu. Try telling that to Netanyahu. You're quite right. This is going to have repercussions far beyond the region. But who is listening? Let me take this to Dr. Zakir Hussain. Dr. Zakir Hussain, you know, the Americans and other countries have been trying desperately to push for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon in the hope that, there is cessation of hostilities in Lebanon so that they can turn their attention back to Gaza, where they've been trying to broker a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel for months. They have failed spectacularly, as I keep saying. Netanyahu doesn't look like he is in the mood to listen. Now, if the Israeli military does go ahead with the ground offensive, which now in fact looks very likely, the fear that's being expressed is, are we going to have another Gaza on our hands? Is southern Lebanon going to be turned into another Gaza? That is a fear that's been expressed by the Lebanese foreign minister and even the Iranian president. Just how far do you think Netanyahu would be willing to go? At the end of the day, there is a price to be paid even by Israel, as has been pointed out by the ambassador, and not just in military terms, but also in economic terms. But really, I don't think anything is proving to be a deterrent for Netanyahu at this point in time.
Yes, you are right that anything is not capable to deter Netanyahu. But I think that two things are very important. That it is the United States to decide what to do at this moment. All the gears and levers are in the hand of American president and the deep state. While on the other hand, Netanyahu himself does not know what I feel that what is the end result of all these fights, because with this ground operation, it means that he is going to continue this war for another year, maybe more year, longer term war in which the entire region is going to engulf. And now the 21 days ceasefire has been requested by Saudi Arabia, UAE and Egypt, Qatar, all this. It means that regional countries are also thinking that if Israel attacks on a sovereign country, its repercussion will not stop to suck them in. And what I feel that there is an emerging alliance between Turkey and Iran. Iran successfully propagated that after me, Turkey, you are not safe. So entire things are going to jumble into one thing, and the key is in the hand of Biden. So I am also not clear that what Netanyahu wants from this ground operation. Ground operation will not be very easy and light. Israel has also already stirred its troops, and its economy is not in condition. The earlier two panelists have also very rightly pointed out the repercussions. So I think that Netanyahu think that it has been successful to destroy the command and communication system and has weakened Hezbollah, but on ground he may prove wrong, because on this two occasions in 2006 and 1982 there was a bloody war in the region. So what I feel that Netanyahu does not know what to do, but he is hell-bent on continuing his plan. So let us see what happens.
He is hell-bent on going ahead with his plan, but really what will that mean for Lebanon and for the entire region? Could the rest of the region get engulfed into a wider conflict? That continues to remain a very big concern, even if everyone's convinced that Iran is not going to be directly involved. Irina Sukuman is with us from New York. Irina, let me ask you this question. Israel's strongest ally, the United States, France and multiple other countries are, urging both sides to agree to a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, Israel seems to have all but rejected this proposal, with a statement issued by the Israeli Prime Minister's office saying that the Prime Minister has not even responded to this proposal. He has told the armed forces to continue fighting with full force, and the military chief is on record as having said we are preparing for a possible ground offensive. Now, at a time when there is this international clamor for a ceasefire, I wonder, in your view, what is Netanyahu likely to say at the UN General Assembly? He is on his way to the United States. He is going to address the UN General Assembly. In the midst of it all, what is he likely to say to the world? Irina, could you unmute yourself, please?
Thank you very much for this question. There's a point important to underscore. There is a difference between the political establishment in Israel and the military establishment over the question of Gaza. There is no such difference over the question of Hezbollah. In fact, it was the military establishment and not Netanyahu that has been pushing for stronger action on the Northern Front, even at a cost to Gaza operations. And it has been, in fact, a statement from the defense minister and from other officials in the U.S. and coming to the U.S. and beyond, calling for to focus the actions on the Northern Front because it presents a greater immediate threat, whereas Hamas has been degraded to the point that it can be managed for the time being. Hezbollah's threat, on the other hand, is immediate. It is ironic that the international community, for the past 11 plus months since Hezbollah launched its attacks on the Northern Front, has been silent about ceasefire and has not pushed Hezbollah to put an end to its attacks on the Northern Front, which Israel has for a very long time managed at a low-grade level without escalating, without very strong response. And during that entire time, when all these people had to flee to the center of Israel, there's been no international push for a ceasefire. That push came only after Israel degraded Hezbollah's communications and other capabilities, effectively isolating the spiritual pillar of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, by eliminating his top advisors as well as disabling much of the middle management. So now is actually a good time for Israel to take strong action that could prevent a ground war by essentially weakening Hezbollah to the point that they are forced to retreat even without Israel having to enter Lebanon. And I think Netanyahu is highly likely to make that point at the United Nations. Another point he should make, and I'm sure he's thinking about it, is that just 4 years ago, at the very same United Nations General Assembly, virtually during COVID in 2020, King Salman of Saudi Arabia called on the international community to disarm Hezbollah because this internationally recognized terrorist organization is both a military and political ideological threat.
Since I'm short on time, Irina says that the Israeli Prime Minister is going to talk about the need, for the international community to disarm Hezbollah, and that this is actually a good time for Israel to go after Hezbollah and weaken it. But then what happens to the people of Lebanon, just as we are asking 11 months into the war, what becomes of the innocent civilian Palestinians who have borne the brunt of the Gaza war? Okay, I'll take closing comments very quickly from our panelists. Major General Ashwini Sivaj, starting with you. What do you think happens next? Is it now a matter of days, you think, before we see an Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon? And just how bad do you think it could be for the people of South Lebanon?
No doubt, Neha, it's just a matter of time. The ground invasion will go because very correctly brought out that they want to degrade the military capability of Hezbollah. That cannot be degraded until and unless they launch invasion inside Lebanon, and that will be done in a day, 2 or 3 days. But the tactics of putting pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon that they can be sent back about 50 to 60 kilometers so that the Israelis can come in North Israel, I don't think that is going to succeed. The only way the things are going to happen is that Israel has no other choice but to launch a ground offensive, which will happen in day or 2 or 3 days. It's a matter of time. It's not that whether it will take or not. The 2-3 things stand out very clearly. America is with Israel, no doubt about it. The other countries like Saudi, UAE, Oman, they don't want this war to widen. But then Hezbollah is also a militant group which has been firing on Israel when Israel was busy fighting with Hamas. So as far as Hezbollah is concerned, even Lebanon must understand they are no friend of Lebanon civilians. They are using them as a human shield. They have put their weapons and also their ammunition into the houses of the people in Lebanon, especially in South Lebanon. So the point is, as far as Israel is concerned, they are very clear. They will like the Hezbollah to weaken to an extent that it is no more threat to them in time to come, and also to ensure that the people from Israel which have migrated from the northern part of Israel
are able to return to their homes. Yes, that is a stated objective for sure. But then one of the stated objectives of the Gaza war from the beginning was we want to bring back home all the hostages, and let's remind ourselves that more than 100 hostages are still trapped in Gaza, and that is one of the reasons why so many Israelis are so unhappy with Netanyahu and his leadership. Even Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said publicly it's an absolute disgrace that the return of the hostages has not been prioritized by the Netanyahu government, and he is of course a part of the same government. Ambassador Bhasati Mukherjee, what do you feel about the spectacular failure of diplomacy that we have seen in the last 11 months vis-a-vis the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, and now the intensifying conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon? Like we keep saying, Netanyahu does what he wants to do. He doesn't listen to anybody, not even to his staunchest ally, the United States of America. And, you know, I'm not sure whether we even have enough time to talk about the spectacular failure and, shall we say, the near irrelevance of the United Nations today.
Actually, Neha, what Netanyahu has done is, from the original sympathy for Israel because of the unprovoked attack by Hamas, we have seen the shifting of international public opinion, notably in the West, not so much in India, where public opinion is still lies firmly with Israel, more or less. But because of the number of civilian casualties, women and children, public opinion has shifted spectacularly against Israel. And what Netanyahu has done is, he has actually weaponized the entire civilian Palestinian population, many of whom were neutral, into actively opposing Israel and regarding it as an enemy. In other words, he has pushed back Israel historically into the kind of isolation that Israel had before Camp David. And it is for him to reflect that whether this ground invasion to soften up targets, as our colleague from New York said, is it worth it when it will effectively make Israel once again a pariah state amongst its neighbors, who it was just 1 year ago on the verge of coming to agreements on trade, on economics, on mutual benefit, on people-to-people contact, etc. Secondly, I don't think that a ground invasion of Lebanon is going to be easy. This is a sovereign country. The matter will be taken up in the United Nations, and Israel will be condemned in the UN Security Council. There's no doubt about it. There is no way in which the West can condone, particularly European Union, the invasion of a sovereign nation. It is against the Charter of the United Nations. It is one thing to try and to eliminate Hamas at the cost of so many Palestinian women and children. It is quite another thing to cross the border for whatever reason, softening up, etc.
And to invade a sovereign country. Yes.
So I don't think, I would actually think, Neha, frankly, that they will back off from a ground invasion. I think they will back
Will they back off? While you're right, the United Nations Security Council is going to adopt a resolution, perhaps condemning any such action by Israel. But then again, when has Israel ever concerned itself with what the international community thinks? That is the biggest problem here. As we wrap up this discussion, Dr. Zakir Hussain, of course, Ambassador Bhasati Mukherjee has made some important points. Now, Israel says we wanted to eliminate Hamas. And this war has gone on for 11 months. They now want to significantly weaken Hezbollah, and they might go ahead with a ground invasion of Lebanon, a sovereign country. But while they talk about eliminating, their enemies, Israel just doesn't seem to realize that it is making itself more and more vulnerable in the process. Talking about what they've done in Gaza, there are many who say that it is enough to radicalize an entire generation of Palestinians while they keep talking about wiping out Hamas. And if they go ahead and do this to the people of Lebanon, well, they're only going to make themselves more hated, more unpopular and more vulnerable, at least in the region. This even as they keep complaining about anti-Semitism.
I think that this is the time for Israeli people to stand up and oppose and depose Netanyahu and stop the army. Otherwise, what you said it's going to happen. Israel cannot sustain this longer war, and it has to go out of this region and settle somewhere. Otherwise, Israel will use, or Netanyahu may use, nuclear weapon. This is the last resort. And what we find that all we agree that war will not be easy, ground war will not be easy, while the region will not be cooperative with Israel, and the world will also not be cooperative to Israel. And America will, as in the beginning of war, the ambassadors of America in Gulf countries wrote a letter to American White House that you are raising, by supporting Israel, you are raising a anti-American generation in the region. So what I think that this is the beginning of American disfame in the region along with Israel. So America has to take a right decision to stop Israel by supplying arms. Even if it stop the supply of arms, within a week, Israel will not be able to launch any kind of attack in the region. This is the right time. America should not consult anybody. It should take action, stop Netanyahu, give a firm warning at United Nations General Assembly meetings. That's why this is the solution of ending the war. Otherwise, we will keep on discussing.
States alone can bring these wars to an end. Does the United States really want to do it? Does Biden want to do it? They're facing an election. That's where the focus seems to be. We don't know what the new president who comes into the White House next year is going to do. But clearly the situation in the Middle East is not just on the boil, it is worsening by the day, perhaps by the hour. We leave it at that. Major General Ashwini Sivaj, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, Dr. Zakir Hussain and Irina Sukuman, thank you so much to all of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, let's now take a quick break here on Global Lens, but there's plenty more on the other side. Don't go away.
A warrior so brave he'll forever be hailed. Maharashtra is the hit.
Maharashtra tourism.
Fast. My God, isn't she your daughter?
Yes.
She's playing football. This is boys' game. Make her study. If she doesn't get a good job, she will get a good match. Will you win the world by playing football?
Go! Yes, auntie. My daughter will win the world by playing football.
Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Muktiwani Yoda, who was aide to Sheikh Mujib, came to my CEO. I told him that the family of Sheikh Mujib is under captivity of the Pakistani forces. The first lady came with Sheikh Mujib and she embraced me and said, the God, the Allah has sent you to save us. Modi ji and the Hasinas, during talk, she brought out this point again that Major Ashok Tara of Indian Army said me, my mother, my sister, my brother, we got independence on 17th December because of Ashok Tara.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West yet again that Russia could use nuclear weapons if it was struck with conventional missiles, and that Moscow would consider any assault on it supported by a nuclear power to be a joint attack. The decision to change Russia's official nuclear doctrine is the Kremlin's answer to deliberations in the United States and Britain about whether or not to give Ukraine permission to fire conventional Western missiles into Russia. Putin, opening a meeting of Russia's Security Council, said the changes were in response to a swiftly changing global landscape which had thrown up new threats and risks for Russia.
Обновленные редакции документа.
The updated version of the document proposes that aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear weapon state, but with the participation or support of a nuclear weapon state, should be regarded as a joint attack on the Russian Federation. The conditions for Russia's transition to the use of nuclear weapons are also clearly defined. We will consider such a possibility as soon as we receive reliable information about a massive launch of aerospace attack means and their crossing of our state border, meaning strategic or tactical aircraft, cruise missiles, drones, hypersonic missiles, and other aircraft.
Let's now bring you an update on the UN General Assembly that's currently underway in New York. In his address at the UN General Assembly, French President Emmanuel Macron expressed strong support for India's inclusion as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Macron also backed the candidacy of Brazil, Japan, Germany and 2 African nations, emphasizing the need for a more inclusive and representative Security Council. Currently, only 5 countries, the US, China, Russia, France and the UK, hold permanent seats at the UNSC.
We know who's responsible. While we have a Security Council that has been blocked, that is blocked reciprocally according to each another's interests, while that's still the case, we won't be able to make progress. Is there a better system? I don't think so. So let's make the UN more efficient. Firstly, perhaps making them more representative. And that's why France, as I reiterate here, is in favour of the Security Council being expanded. Germany, Japan, India, Brazil should be permanent members, much like 2 countries that Africa will decide to represent them. These new elected members will also need to be accepted, but the reform of the composition of the Security Council is not sufficient alone to make it more effective.
Tensions are escalating in Bangladesh as the Hindu community prepares for the largest festival, Durga Puja. Radical Islamic groups are protesting the open celebration of the festival and opposing nationwide holidays during this time. Recently, an extremist group called Insaf Kimkari Chhatra Janta marched in Dhaka, opposing the use of a playground where Hindus have celebrated Durga Puja for years. They held placards condemning road closures, idol worship and water pollution from idol immersion, demanding restrictions on public religious displays and festival activities. Their 16-point demand includes limiting government funds for religious events and prohibiting Muslim involvement in supporting Hindu festivals. The group also opposes public holidays for Durga Puja, claiming it disrupts the Muslim majority nation. With the fall of the previous Sheikh Hasina-led government, the Hindu community has faced rising threats and attacks in Bangladesh. All right, now here is a curious story from Japan. He's the world's longest serving death row inmate, and now a court in Japan has just declared him innocent. A pair of blood-spattered trousers in a miso tank and an allegedly forced confession helped send Iwao Hakamata to death row in the 1960s. Now, more than 5 decades later, the world's longest-serving death row prisoner has been declared innocent. A Japanese court today acquitted 88-year-old Hakamata, who was wrongfully sentenced to death in 1968 for murdering a family, marking the end of a marathon legal saga that's brought global scrutiny to Japan's criminal justice system and fueled calls to abolish the death penalty in the country. The judge ruled that the blood-stained clothing which was used to convict Hakamata was planted long after the murders. The judge stated the court cannot accept the fact that the bloodstain would remain reddish if it had been soaked in miso for more than a year. The bloodstains were processed and hidden in the tank by the investigating authorities after a considerable period of time since the incident. Mr. Hakamata cannot be considered the criminal. Once a professional boxer, Hakamata retired in 1961 and got a job at a soybean processing plant in Shizuoka, central Japan, a choice that ruined his life. When Hakamata's boss, his boss's wife and their 2 children were found stabbed to death in their home 5 years later, Hakamata, then a divorcee who also worked at a bar, became the prime suspect. After days of relentless questioning, Hakamata initially admitted to the charges against him, but later changed his plea, arguing that the police had actually forced him to confess by beating and threatening him. He was sentenced to death in a 2-1 decision by judges, despite repeatedly alleging that the police had fabricated evidence. The one dissenting judge stepped down from the bar 6 months later, demoralized by his inability to stop the sentencing. Hakamata, who has maintained his innocence ever since, would go on to spend more than half of his life waiting to be hanged before new evidence led to his release a decade ago. After a DNA test on the blood found on the trousers revealed no match to Hakamata or the victims, the court ordered a retrial in 2014. The Tokyo High Court initially scrapped the request for a retrial, but in 2023 agreed to grant Hakamata a second chance on an order from the Supreme Court. Hakamata's lawyer has termed the ruling groundbreaking, but added 58 years was too long. His case has been more than about just one man. It's raised questions about Japan's reliance on confessions to get convictions, and some say it's one of the reasons why the country should do away with the death penalty. All right, news from the United States now. An Indian origin doctor, Dr. J. Verma, the former COVID-19 czar of New York City, has been fired from his position at Sega Technologies following the revelation of his involvement in drug-fueled sex parties during the pandemic. His NYC COVID policies drew national attention in the US during the pandemic. Dr. Verma, who previously served as a senior health advisor under former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, is reported to have boasted about attending underground rave parties and hosting parties while the city was under severe lockdowns. These admissions were made public through secretly recorded conversations. On the 23rd of September, Sega Technologies, where he worked, issued a statement confirming Dr. Verma's immediate termination. The scandal erupted last week when podcaster Steven Crowder released clips of Dr. Verma's candid discussions in which he said, "I did all this deviant sexual stuff." He confessed to sneaking around due to his role in managing New York City's COVID response. In one recorded conversation, Dr. Verma recounted hosting a party in August 2020 where attendees used the drug MDMA. He says, "So we rented a hotel, we all took Molly, it was 8 to 10 of us in a room and everybody had a blast because everybody was so pent up." Dr. Verma also recalled attending a June 2021 rave with hundreds of attendees, and when asked if he regretted his actions, he replied, "No, actually I love being my authentic self." City Councilwoman Ina Vernikov has condemned Dr. Verma's actions, stating, "While grandmothers took their last breaths alone on cold hospital beds, Dr. Verma was fulfilling his sick fantasies with hundreds of sweaty strangers." Michael Caine of Teachers for Choice said he was disgusted hearing Verma say having drug-fueled group sex orgies was necessary for him to be his authentic self because COVID had him pent up. Dr. Verma has issued a statement acknowledging his actions, saying, "In those private conversations that were secretly recorded, spliced, diced and taken out of context, I referred to events that transpired 4 years ago. I participated in some private gatherings. I take responsibility for not using the best judgment at the time." In other news, the killing of a Japanese schoolboy in China has sparked an outpouring of anger and soul-searching over the rise of extreme nationalism in the country, with some accusing the Chinese government of fanning an anti-Japan sentiment and even the education of hatred. The tragic loss of a young life has once again thrown a spotlight on the complex relationship between Asia's two biggest economies, which has been shaped by their wartime history and changing power dynamics brought about by China's rise. The 10-year-old, born to a Japanese father and Chinese mother, was fatally stabbed on his way to school by a man in the southern city of Shenzhen last Wednesday. It was the second knife attack on Japanese children and third assault on foreigners in China in recent months. Authorities in Beijing have refused to disclose the motive in each case, describing them as isolated incidents that could happen in any country. But to some Shenzhen residents and online commentators, the daylight killing in one of China's most cosmopolitan cities has prompted urgent reflection on the role of nationalistic propaganda and xenophobia in fueling such attacks. One resident said, "As a Chinese, I feel heartbroken, outraged and ashamed. This kind of violence is the result of long-term education of hatred. There is no good in instilling hatred from a young age." He echoed a groundswell of commentaries and online posts calling for a reckoning on the anti-Japan sentiment. Many of these posts have since been censored by Chinese social media platforms. A Chinese blogger wrote, "The anti-Japan rhetoric based on nationalist narratives has increased to dominate the internet. These online remarks will inevitably spill over from the screen and impact the real world." The killing has shaken the Japanese community in China, with some of Japan's biggest companies offering to repatriate staff members and their families. The development risks undermining Beijing's recent efforts to court Japanese businesses to expand investment in China amid a record exodus of foreign capital from the country's flagging economy. And finally, as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens, we have an interesting story for you. A picture of billionaire Elon Musk with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni at a recent event has gone viral, triggering social media speculation that the two were dating. At an award ceremony in New York on Tuesday, Musk also praised Meloni, calling her authentic, honest and truthful. Musk, while bestowing the Atlantic Council Global Citizen Award on Meloni, said it was an honor to present the accolade to someone who's even more beautiful on the inside than she was on the outside. Giorgia Meloni is someone I admire, who's done an incredible job as the Prime Minister of Italy. She's also someone who's authentic, honest, truthful, and that can't always be said about politicians, Musk said. Meloni also took to her official X account and thanked Musk for his remarks. A Tesla fan club then posted a picture of Musk and Meloni and wrote, "Do you think they will date?" The 53-year-old billionaire actually responded to that question, saying they were not dating. Meloni received the award for her strong support of the EU and becoming the first female Prime Minister of Italy. Well, this isn't the first time that there has been such feverish speculation regarding the Italian Prime Minister. The internet has already labelled the Tesla CEO and Giorgia Meloni as a perfect couple. One user said, "Now that's the kind of international power couple I can get behind." Some users wrote, "That's amor, that's love." Another one said, "I want to find someone who looks at me the same way Meloni looks at Musk." All right, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching.
This is News9 Live, India's only digital exclusive live stream. For the early adopters, bringing you the news 24/7. For the smart audiences on the smartest TVs. News9 Live. Stream now on your smart TVs.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Here are the top headlines we're tracking today. The Supreme Court has granted bail to former Tamil Nadu Minister Senthil Balaji. He was arrested by Enforcement Directorate last year in connection with a money laundering case. A Mumbai court has sentenced Shiv Sena UBT MP Sanjay Raut to 15 days imprisonment in a defamation complaint filed against him by BJP leader Kirit Somaya's wife Medha. Now, Raut had accused Somayas of involvement in 100 crore rupees toilet scam in the Meera Bhayandar Municipal Corporation case. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Pune has been cancelled amid severe rainfall, marking the city's highest September downpour in over 86 years. Pune received a 131 mm rain on 25th of September alone. The Central Board of Film Certification has told the Bombay High Court that a certificate will be issued to Kangana Ranaut's Emergency if certain cuts are made. Now, producers Zee Entertainment have sought time to consider the cuts recommended by the revision committee. The next hearing is on 30th of September. Days after claiming that 900 Kuki militants were planning to attack peripheral villages of Imphal Valley districts, the Manipur government has retracted its statement. It now says the likelihood of any such misadventure by armed group is minimal. The two-day session of the Delhi Assembly began on a stormy note on 26th of September as BJP and Aam Aadmi Party leaders raised slogans against each other. The United States, France and several European countries have called for an immediate 21-day ceasefire across the Israel-Lebanon border following intense discussion at the United Nations. The pause in hostilities would allow for the warring parties to work towards a diplomatic resolution of the conflict. India's embassy in Beirut has urged Indian nationals to avoid travel to Lebanon due to escalating violence. At least 72 people have been killed in Lebanon as Israel widens its airstrikes. Unknown miscreants vandalized the Baptist Hindu temple in California's Sacramento on 25th of September, desecrating it with graffiti saying Hindus go back. This was the second desecration of a Baptist temple in less than a month in the United States. The imprint of Make in India initiative has become visible across sectors, including areas where we never ever dreamt of making an impact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said on Wednesday. In a blog on LinkedIn, he lauded everyone who played a key role in making the initiative and launched a decade ago. A roaring success. The government launched Make in India on 25th of September 2014 to make India a manufacturing hub of globe. 10 years on, how has this impacted job creation, India's share in global exports, manufacturing and services sector? Well, today we take a look at the 10 years of Make in India. Joining me in this discussion are some very key important members. Let me quickly take this moment to welcome on the show as Sampath Raman, Advisor ASSOCHAM and past President FKCCI. Also with us is Professor N.K. Goel, is the Chairman and Telecom Equipment Manufacturers Association of India. Also joining us is Mithali Nikore, Founder and Chief Economist, Nikore Associates. Mithali, I want to come to you first. 10 years of Make in India. We're looking at numbers that are coming in by the way of India's share or rather manufacturing share of India's GDP. Now, compared to a 16.7% of GDP share at constant prices in 2013 and 14, share of GDP today is, and in manufacturing, is 15.9% in the year 23-24. Make in India has completed 10 years, but it does look like we're yet to pick up when it comes to manufacturing.
No, absolutely. Shweta, first of all, thanks for bringing me in the discussion. And I think what is important here to understand is not just the share of GDP, because the composition of GDP has been changing in the last, sort of decade. We've seen the services sector growth really take off. And of course, that is why the services sector, accounts for almost 60% of our GDP today. And it did not do so, 10 years ago. That time, the share of agriculture was actually much more. And even the share of government spending was much more. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the composition of GDP has changed, and of course, services sector has grown much faster. However, in the absence of Make in India, the question is not whether Make in India has succeeded or not. I mean, has manufacturing gone up or not? Without Make in India, we might have seen the share of manufacturing fall even more. But because of Make in India, we have been able to maintain that share of manufacturing from 16% to say a 15% today, because Make in India as a program has ensured that there has been an improvement in the ease of doing business, and India has made competitive compared to other economies which are also putting in a lot of measures and a lot of marketing and a lot of regulatory reforms and labor reforms to bring developed countries and investors to their economies and come and manufacture there. So in the face of this kind of global competition, Make in India has actually given us a framework, an edge to market the opportunity to manufacture in India, as well as to actually implement a lot of the measures and reforms that were required to make manufacturing sustainable. And the last data point I would say in this segment is around last year's growth rate. See, it's not only about the composition, but it's about the growth. Last year, manufacturing hit a growth rate of 10%, which is something which has been unprecedented. We have not seen it in almost 5 to 6 years, but after 5 years of concerted effort, we are now starting to see the results. So I feel in the next 5 years, we'll see more of the results. And of course, the PLI scheme, which has been a complement to Make in India.
I'll come to PLI in just a bit. Mithali, thank you very much for setting the ball rolling. And I'll come to PLI. We have a long discussion ahead of us. Let me quickly get in Mr. Sampath Raman into this conversation. Sir, if I were to ask you 10 years on, and we're looking at data, of course, but if I were to ask you to sum up what has come by the way of that Make in India program, which was launched in September of 2014, how has the manufacturing sector in this country really progressed? What are your takeaways, sir? How have things really changed? And as Mithali pointed out, it's not so much as the share of manufacturing in the GDP, but other reforms that we have seen. According to you, what were those key reforms that India has been able to bring about in the last decade?
Thank you for bringing me in this discussion. I would compliment Modi government for having introduced excellent infrastructure schemes. There's a massive growth in the infrastructure, road, rail, airport, seaports, whatever you talk about. Everywhere there has been massive improvement. Digital structure has improved excellently. And in fact, it is the land parcels are available. Trained labor is a question mark. Finance is available. And if you leave that, labor, trained labor, everything is in our favor. Only thing is, if the large industries can grow, whether with FDI or without FDI. MSMEs do not have yet the necessary opportunity. The lady who spoke talked about EODB. EODB is not there at all. It is a farce. Everywhere there are stumbling blocks. It is not only the central government. It is both center and state have to work together in this area, especially when power, water, labor, land, all are in the hands of states. Not much can be done by the center. If both of them work together, or in all the states where both are working together, the growth is phenomenal. And
okay,
the one thing I would, rather 2 points I was critical about is the subsidies which are given for the social.
Sir, sorry,
They
we'll stick to Make in India for now, if you allow me to, because we're discussing 10 years of Make in India. Sir, I would like to stick to Make in India. Let me quickly bring in Mithali back into this conversation. Then, Mithali, you know, to your point, and you were discussing, of course, how PLI has been a great initiative by the government, the current NDA government, to really bring about some sort of change when it comes to manufacturing in India. For the longest time, we talked about rolling out a red carpet, getting rid of red tapeism. But as far as setting shop for some of these key industries in this country is concerned, we've seen electronics do fabulous when it comes to making in India. India's share of electronics manufacturing globally has gone up. Some of these key sectors, including pharmaceuticals, have done really well when it comes to PLI. According to you, has PLI been a success?
So I think, first of all, it's not fair to evaluate PLI at this point. You know, the PLI scheme was introduced in 2021. We've only seen about 3 years of its, implementation. Of course, the initial data is showing that the PLI scheme is progressing. So, of course, the initial trends seem to suggest that we're going in the right direction. But we have to give it sufficient time. I would say 5-year mark is where we should be commenting on whether it's a success or not. The second point is, which are the sectors that are doing really well on PLI? The first one, as you said, electronics. The second one, I would say, is smartphone manufacturing. 99% of smartphones that are being used in India today for domestic use are being manufactured in India. I mean, this is a massive turnaround from a situation in 2021 where almost all of our, electronics were imported. The second area in which it's doing really well is actually when you look at the components manufacturing. A lot of auto components, electronic components, we don't see these sectors because they are not so glitzy. But you can see even like a number of companies are coming in from Japanese and South Korean companies coming in the value chains, setting up manufacturing units. I've personally seen them in several clusters in the south of India as well as in Rajasthan. And we can already see the impact of those on the local economic development. And then the third aspect about PLI, which is very important, is that certain companies are taking the decision to manufacture in India and also export, like not only for the Indian market, but also export to other markets from India. And that brings us crucial foreign exchange. So therefore, there's a very important benefit of the PLI scheme, which right now has not been captured. But we need to study that in terms of how many companies are saying we'll manufacture in India and export from India because of the PLI scheme. And I think this is happening more and more in my consultations.
Absolutely. I think that will be an important thing to note down, whether to understand if PLI for the past 3 years has been a success or not. But let me also get in Mr. Sampath Raman. I think an important conversation that we were having is with respect to India's export share. Now, without really going into numbers, we do know that we are living in a very difficult economic environment. While India has been able to cut down on its import, which means essentially signifies that there's been some sort of self-reliance, that India is meeting its own needs and demands internally. Export figures are not looking very good right now. Would that be because our exports are not subpar excellence? We've not been able to tap into new supply chains? Or do you believe it's because of what's happening socio-economically, geopolitically, worldwide, where the demand seems to be way lower today in the past couple of years?
This is what I was trying to bring about in my discussion. If the cost of production is going to be higher than China, you can never be on the growth path